Today is May 7th, 2003. We are at the Warhawk Air Museum. I am conducting a Veterans History Project interview in concert with the Veterans History Project with the Library of Congress. I am interviewing Mr. Nat Adams. In the room for the interview will be myself, Sue Paul, Tim Peterson, who will be conducting the camera equipment, and of course Mr. Nat Adams. Nat, could you tell us please where you were born and what year you were born? And
I was born in Buell, Idaho, July 16th, 1921.
And when World War II started, you made a decision to go into which division of the military?
Well, I went into the Navy program to become a naval aviator.
And where do you currently live? What address do you have?
We are in Boise, Idaho, 1119 Houston Road.
Nat, could you tell us a little bit about where you were born and kind of your growing up years and where you were when World War II started and why you chose to go into the Navy and become an aviator?
You bet.
Okay.
Well, my parents moved from Tennessee out to Buell, Idaho, right soon after World War I, and as hundreds of other people did because of the new reclamation and the new water, irrigated land, and so forth. And my mother and father were the first of several of their family that moved to Buell from Tennessee. But my brother, my younger brother, and my older sister and I were all three born in Buell. But my dad, in the meantime, he had originally worked for a farmer in the Buell area, and he went to work for a retail lumber company, Home Lumber and Coal Company in Buell, and they moved. We moved to Boise when I was 3 years old. My dad became the manager of the Home Lumber and Coal Company in Boise.
And what year was that, Nat?
It would have been 1924 that we moved to Boise. And I grew up in Boise schools, and we lived several areas in Boise, but I graduated from Boise High School and in 1939, and then that fall I worked, and then at Christmas time, or whatever that would be, the winter term, I started at Boise Junior College, and I had a couple of years, well, I had 1 year at the old building, which was near St. Luke's Hospital, and then I was there the first year that they were open on the old Boise Airport. And then the war broke out during my sophomore year there at Boise Junior College. And
where were you when that was announced?
Well, I was with my two best buddies. We were going to a movie. It was on Sunday. I never will forget it. We went to the Penny Theater. And the girl at the box office, we knew, and she told us that it had just come over the air, you know, that Pearl Harbor had been attacked. And of course, we were all at that age and knew that that was going to involve our lives. And then I made application, I was in training in the civilian pilot training program. We were flying off the campus of Boise Junior College. We would taxi down to the end of the, near Broadway, and take off right over the Student Union building. And anyway.
May I go back just a little bit? 1927, I believe, Charles Lindbergh landed.
Yes, and I was there as a first grader.
You were a child, but
yeah,
do you remember that
we
quite
went
well?
in buses from my grade school.
No
and I still have my medallion that they gave out these. They were about the size of a $50, but they were engraved with his name on them and so forth. And of course that was pretty exciting. We had also seen the parade downtown, but we were at the airport when he landed.
Did you become intrigued with flight as an early?
I did.
In your early years? I
did, and I made. I don't know, maybe 40 model airplanes. In those days, the little kits, the wingspan was about 6 inches, but they were all balsa, and you carved the fuselage out of solid balsa, and then added the wings, tails, and sections, and so forth. But it was, and I had an avid interest in aviation, and was out there with frequency. I didn't have the opportunity to ride in an airplane until I started my flight training in the And the Piper Cubs is what we trained in there at Boise on the campus. Val Baraciola from Nampa was my instructor, and he
and this was prior to December 7th. You were doing this prior to December 7th?
No, it was after the flight training would have been just after. It would have been in that spring of 42, and then I went into I graduated from that primary program, and that fall, well, I was sworn into the Navy in Seattle that summer of 42, and then we were on campus at Boise State that fall, and we lived in the Student Union building. And it was only very recently that someone from Boise Junior College had interviewed me because they had no record of that, but there were 6 of us that actually lived in the Student Union and flew during the day and had our ground school right there in the Boise Junior College classrooms. And then we finished that program, and I left for the Navy in December of 1942. And
where did they send you?
Well, our first training was at at St. Mary's pre-flight. They had a program for 3 months. It was principally to get us into physical conditioning, and it was rigorous. I mean, we had 2 weeks of football, 2 weeks of basketball, 2 weeks of swimming, 2 weeks of this, 2 weeks of that, and 3 months of that athletic program before we ever were introduced to airplanes.
And you were athletic anyway. You were a wrestler?
No, I was a boxer.
A boxer. You were a boxer. Okay, I knew it was.
No, I had boxed at Boise Junior College and thought I was a boxer until we were matched with some of those kids right out of the ghettos at Boise, at Mountain Home, and also from Gowan Field. I mean, we had our hands full. But in any case, the 3 months of training or athletic program at St. Mary's College, California, we went directly to flight training at Los Alamitos, which is near Long Beach, California, and we trained in the Yellow Perils, the Stearman, open cockpit trainers. And the first day I was there, I couldn't believe the number of airplanes that were coming back from their hour flight. You know, it just seemed like there were a million of them, but they all landed, and I was there for 3 months in that training program. And I think one of the fun highlights, seeing Bob Hope on television recently, I was one of 2 cadets that were, I don't know whether it was alphabetical order or what, but anyway, this other cadet and I escorted him for about a good hour around the base before that evening show. And
what was he like?
Oh, he was just incredible.
Was he a charming person?
And you know, I think the thing that there has been very little publicity about, he was a very clean liver. He was not a drinker. He had given people money to give up liquor, had given people money to give up cigarettes, and very little has ever been said about that because of his, you know, his comedy was always clean. And we had some others, well, like Kay Kaiser. He was about as foul-mouthed as any entertainer we had, and you never hear anything about that. But no, I was really, that was a real fun highlight of my experience there. The other thing that I really will never forget about Los Alamitos and the flight training was that, you know, our program was such that we didn't really get as much sleep as we would love to have, and that's where I learned to sleep standing up. I mean, we could actually, you would see 10 or 12 cadets leaning against a hangar door, sound asleep. I mean, you could train yourself to do that. And then we would have
survival skills.
And in our classrooms, we still had training in recognition and so forth, where they would flash a picture of say a P-38 on the screen just for that fast, and then you had to write down what you saw. And but there was a great number of guys. You know, there would be maybe 60 of us in the room, but half of them would fall asleep, and it was, and you would be marked off, you'd be marked down, and several guys had to take the course over, and it was mostly because they just didn't get a high grade, mostly because they had fallen off, and the lights would be off, and the projector would be on and flashing. But anyway, that's something you never forget. And then in the training, I had an officer that I don't know, his name was Adams, and I don't know, I apparently didn't say the right thing when he introduced himself to me and told me that Adams was a pretty important name around there, that he wanted to see to it that I lived up to it. Well, I'm sure that it was the expression on my face that caused him to think that I was a problem student. And anyway, he gave me demerits just for the least thing, a spot of oil on my shoe, or if I didn't have my the seam of my pants exactly right, well, I would get demerits. And I was always the one that was responsible for the marching while we were in that program. I would have these other cadets that had demerits. Why they would march with. I was in charge because I was the best known, I guess. But anyway, we had a movie where there were these soldiers marching, this black group, and they would march, and they would do steps to the side, then they'd do steps forward. And so all of us had seen that movie, and that's what we were doing when this Officer Adams came around the corner, and I got 10 demerits and they got 5 each, and it caused me to be with a record number of demerits. And my group left, and I was held there at that for a full week. I could not leave until a full week after my group had already graduated and left. And I had to go before a court martial, or kind of a court martial or whatever. Anyway, they had psychologists there and everything, you know, and then this one psychologist told me later that this Adams had told him that he didn't want to see me washed out, but he wanted to see me brought down a little bit. Well, it was, and I never had another demerit in the rest of my training, but that's a small, something you'd never forget, and I have saved that from both my sons and their children. But then the next, after finishing in the flight training there with the Yellow Perils, I went to a base at Beeville, Texas, which is right near Kingsville, which is near Corpus Christi. Well, we trained there in the what we call the Vultee vibrators. That was our first training there, and then it may have been as long as the first 30 days, I don't know. But then we graduated to the AT-6s,
Did you have a favorite plane in the training stages?
Oh, the AT-6 had to be the best. Well, that open cockpit Stearman is hard to beat. And it's, I think as an acrobatic airplane, it was really the most fun of anything. I mean, as far as doing acrobatics, I mean, rolls and Immelmans and loops and so forth, the Stearman was really a, we had, backing up to Boise Junior College, that fall of 1942, we actually flew an airplane that was a part of Webb Apparel's training. It was the Ryan ST, an open cockpit airplane. It was probably the greatest airplane for acrobatics, except it would cut out when you were on your back, and that always gave you heart failure. But yeah, I never had that experience with a Yellow Peril. But then in finishing the training at Corpus Christi in the AT-6s, we graduated and got our wings at Corpus Christi, and then went to, we had an opportunity at that time to either go fighter or torpedo or bombers, and or if some of them even went lighter than air. But I chose fighters because I just wanted to be solo in an airplane. I didn't want crewmen, and I just, and I've never understood the mentality of those that did want that, particularly those that went into torpedo bombers, where they would have to come at a ship at slow speed to drop that torpedo. And I liked the idea of having speed, and that was the reason I made the decision to go into fighters. And then we were 3 months in Florida to after we had graduated, and we were in training as ensigns in this fighter training, and then that was putting us into. I think I mentioned earlier that I left for the Navy in late December and started that, and it makes it very easy to remember because I was in training the whole year of '43, and then got my wings in the fall of '43, and then we had our fighter training, and we were by the time we finished our fighter training, it was into mid to late December. And where did we go from there? We went to Great Lakes, or went to the Lake Michigan to make our carrier landings aboard a carrier, because they had a problem with German subs off the coast of Florida, so they moved everything to Lake Michigan, and we went out with our winter flight gear on and our winter helmets on, and couldn't even crank our cockpits closed. We were in F4Fs. We had trained in Florida in F4Fs, and then we were in F4Fs, the Grumman Wildcat, for our carrier landings, and we had to make those 4 landings out there in that frigid. And we had a real concern about if you had an engine fail, you would be in an open cockpit, and if you had to land in the water that you're going to flip on your back, and of course that was because we could not retract our wheels because everything was done with a crank, and in that temperatures, I mean, it was below freezing every day that we were there, and we had to do some training. In Florida, we had done some simulated carrier landings.
Well, how did you do simulated carrier?
Well, they had a landing.
What were you flying? Were you
in an F4F? Yeah, we had the Wildcats in Florida, and there would be a marked off in white on a landing strip, and then there would be a landing signal officer there, and when he would give you a cut, then you'd cut your engine and then just land right there try to hit the spot on the pavement, and that was our training before we went to do our 4 carrier landings.
So tell us about your first real carrier landing.
Well, finding the damn thing was because we were in very inclement weather. I mean, we had fog, but it was clear enough. We could see the carrier, but we couldn't see land. I mean, it was just that area around the aircraft carrier that we could observe the water, but you had to make the 4 landings. 4 of us flew out together, and then we finally, as the last of the 4 made his 4th landing, we returned to Glenview Naval Air Station, which is right near Chicago.
So how'd you feel when you came in on final?
Well, I think that without the simulated flight training and carrier landings on the ground, you would have been really spooked. But it was very, very close to the same. Only difference being that it was much less width.
Did it look pretty tiny when you were on final?
Oh yes, yes it did, and it was a small carrier. I think it was only 78 feet wide, and of course the big carriers were 105 feet, so it was quite a. But then we got our 4 landings in, and I got home for Christmas. So it was, I went by train all the way to Pocatello, and I had a brother there in school at Idaho State, and visited with him, and then we came home together on the bus. But it was just no, I took a bus from Salt Lake. Had to, I think, because I took the train to Pocatello. But anyway, that's a...
Was there anything different when you got home at Christmas because people were preparing for the war, or?
Well, it was, you know, I remember it. I don't remember any particular social activity, but I think it was just being home was great. Mm-hmm. My brother and my three sisters, we were all home together mm-hmm. for that Christmas. And then I left, I had met this girl the summer of '42, and she was in Boise. And I was out at the airport, not airport, but at the train to leave for Southern California to go to my departure was from San Diego. And I was out at the depot in Boise to take the train to go to Southern California, and she was there. And I just thought that was very exciting. Well, she wasn't there to see me off. She was there to meet her father coming in from Chicago. So anyway, that I was off to the wars, and we left from San Pedro, actually, on a tanker. There were just four of us. That was our transportation, the four of us, out to Honolulu on a tanker leaving out of San Pedro Harbor in Southern California.
Did you know where you were going?
Well, we knew we were going to Pearl Harbor okay. Because we were going out as replacement pilots. We were not yet assigned. They had to have replacement pilots, and they. Many of the, well, the majority of the guys went to squadrons while they were still in the United States. But we, the four of us, we were all together in training in Florida, the four of us, and then we went out on this tanker to Pearl Harbor, and then went to a replacement squadron over on the opposite side of the island at Kaneohe, and we trained there, and then I got orders to a squadron, and the carrier that I was assigned to, or I mean, the carrier that I was assigned to the squadron aboard was the Monterey, the USS Monterey. She was one of the intermediate-sized carriers. They were called CVLs for light carrier. They were on cruiser hulls, and we were faster than the big carriers, but we were a whole lot less width. And the cruiser, on the cruiser hull, they tended to roll considerably more than the big carriers. But anyway, I had orders to the VF-30 aboard this Monterey. And we had, well, it was a good bunch of guys. I was only aboard there about 3 months. But the one pilot I remember, I flew with him, Hank Carey was his name. He had been out earlier and had one tour of duty, and he was on a second tour of duty. But he led us into some of the damnedest things. And I mean, he had a terrific imagination. One time we followed this smoke that was on the island of Truk, which was a major Japanese island that we attack, and we followed this smoke down that was from the fires that had been set by earlier raids on the field that was burning. And we followed that smoke down and broke out under 500 feet, right, and then strafed the hell out of this air base there on Truk, and oh goodness, how we got out of there without any one of us getting hit. It was just the amount of of armament that was coming at us was just staggering. And then another time...
Did they get any planes up after you? Did they get any planes
No,
off the
well, we
coast to
didn't
you?
on that particular raid. But there were a number of them that were knocked down that day. And this Kerry he had 6 planes to his credit when he came back for his second tour of duty. And I would have flown anywhere with him, but I just, of course, I was young, new and green and eager, but it was those early, we hit Truk, we hit several other major island installations, you know, that were heavily defended before they were, I'm not sure that what happened later. I think Truk was one of the islands they bypassed because of its tremendous armament and also the one attack we made there was there was a cruiser in dry dock, and of course we went in shooting at it, and we made a pass, you know, shooting at it and then flying beyond it, all 4 of us, and we were fortunate enough to get through without any casualties in that. But then they came back to Pearl Harbor. They were ready to go home, and I did not have the required 4 months to go home with them. And I had almost 3 months. I can't remember exactly how many, but anyway, they put us off at Pearl Harbor and back into the replacement pool. And then I got orders to another squadron aboard this same Monterey, and we were sent out aboard a carrier that had it was loaded with planes to take out to the forward area, you know, as where they had lost airplanes and so forth. And we ferried, there were 4 of us that had had previous action, you know, about the same, 3 months, whatever. And we ferried planes aboard the Enterprise, the Enterprise, and they canceled our orders to the other squadron, and we became a part of Air Group 10 on this other carrier. And again, they were ready to go home, and they flew our tails off. The 4 of us were all ensigns, and one of the 4 of us was in the air every time there was anybody on combat air patrol. But that's the Navy, that's the military. But anyway, no one of the 4 of us had the 4 months that were required to be eligible to go home. So what did they do? They dumped us on an island at Eniwetok in the middle of nowhere, and with orders to the commandant of the island, and we had no planes to fly. We had no accommodations. We were, you know, abandoned and we slept in the. They did have cushions in the on the pews in the little church, and we slept there, I think, for about 5 nights before we even had bunks, you know. And so we felt we were abandoned, and we had this guy in the parachute loft make us some things to show there were 5 of us, as a matter of fact, and we had a symbol put on our jackets that was with the middle finger, and the emblem was the shafted 5. Anyway.
Who were the people that lived on the island?
Well, it was occupied, and there were squadrons of planes. Okay. Yeah, it was occupied. No,
did you keep the emblem?
Oh, I still have it somewhere in the trunk. But we just, well, we didn't even have showers, you know. We had to, when it would rain, we'd run out and soap down and hope that it would keep raining until we could get our shower. And of course it was just... So
what did you do during that period of time on the island if you weren't flying?
We went to the officers' club and drank. Mm-hmm. No, I shouldn't say that right out loud, but no, it was, and then this one night there at the officers' club, I ran into a guy from Boise who was the second in command of a squadron that was brand new in the forward area. A guy named Baird Griffin. He was raised in Boise, and he was a senior full lieutenant. and they needed 3 pilots. I mean, they had lost, and so I went with him out to aboard the USS San Jacinto, and met with the skipper, and he said to bring a couple of my buddies with him, and I was overnight, and then the next day I found my buddies, and we went aboard the San Jacinto, and we were headed to the forward area. We were on our way.
Well, the forward area meaning what?
Well, the forward, the Pacific, Eniwetok and west. Mm-hmm. And well, and we on that carrier we made attacks against Guam, and we made attacks against Saipan and Tinian, and And
you were still flying Wildcats at that point?
No, pardon me. No, we were introduced to F-6Fs when we got to Honolulu. Mm-hmm. But we also, if you can believe it, we had 4 hours in F-6F Hellcats when we landed them aboard this Monterey, and we were on our way. But that was in the F-6s, and then on the and of course we had F-6s aboard this San Jacinto.
Did you like flying the F-6 compared to the F-4?
Oh yes, it was a much bigger airplane, and much more power. See, we had 2,000 horsepower. That big engine, big radial engine. We had the same engine in the F-6F Hellcat that they had in those Grumman Avengers that were also by Grumman, that like George Bush flew, and that we had a squadron of them aboard. And there were 16 of those torpedo pilots, including George Bush, aboard this San Jacinto. And there were, I think, 36 of us, 36 fighter pilots. But that is, well, we were in the forward area almost immediately after I went aboard there. I was picked up at well, I mentioned it earlier, but